Welcome back, everyone, to the VS Code Insiders Podcast, the behind the scenes look at your favorite code editor, VS Code. I'm James Montemagno, your host, and with me, the one, the only software engineer on the VS Code team. Well, there's more than one. Justin Chen is here. How's it going, Justin?
Good. How's it going? I think I'm pretty excited to talk about Autopilot today.
Yeah, I'm super stoked. You and I were planning on starting to record this podcast about 20 minutes ago, but then we just geeked out on Pokemon and and the Nintendo Museum and Poketopia and everything like that. So it was fun. And
Yeah,
people may notice that you're a little bit of a Pokemon fan, just a little bit.
just a little, just a little. I don't know if you can tell, and also the giant VS Code sign in the background as well. I
The
saw
two
that
of
a
them
lot.
together is beautiful. I love it. I myself also a huge Pokemon fan, so I'm excited to geek out and play some Poketopia together. So today is gonna be a little bit special because there's been honestly like a crazy amount of amazing new features inside of VS Code, and we try to like talk about some of the deeper things inside of here. And I think what's been really fascinating, Justin, is kind of how the chat has evolved quite a bit, and how developers are focusing on interacting, working with tools, and now there's so many tools, skills, agents, MCPs, like actual, tool, normal tool calling, things like that. Like, what's your day to day in this space, and what's your main area that you're focused on the VS Code team?
Yeah, yeah. The main thing I've been working on recently is just the general chat UI and UX, and just general chat experience because I think there's a lot that goes into like what you see when the chat is like rendering, or a lot of like tools that you can utilize to properly, I guess use the agent to the best extent as possible. Yeah, I work mostly on UI rendering, a couple of the UX features with the input box, editing previous requests, checkpoints, just a little bit of everything, to kind of make your experience in the chat panel a little bit better.
I really feel like for me, as I use the chat, as the team's been evolving these features, everything you just mentioned, like I use like steering. I go back, I edit previous requests. Like I'm looking at the output, like the streaming input that's coming in. I've noticed a few things before we get to autopilot is like, it feels as though, and maybe you can distill this down since you're in this area. It feels like the chat is less chatty recently. You know what I mean? Like it's a lot more like shimmers. You know what I mean? Like what is happening? What is evolving in that
Yeah.
space?
Yeah, I think it's partially maybe some of the quirks of the models, but I think one thing that we've been working on is just kind of making the chat not so annoying, I guess, and making it a little bit more consistent as you go through and look at it. So, for example, the shimmers, right? A lot of the reasoning text, a lot of the tool calls, a lot of these things are getting collapsed into containers now, and they'll just collapse away once you're done. So, as you kind of scroll through your chat, you might notice that there are a lot of these like drop downs that contain a lot of information inside, but maybe it's something that as a user you don't actually need to care about.
That's cool. Yeah, I'm a big, and Pierce knows this. I'm a big like reader of the chat. I love to understand like what the agents are doing. I almost need a slow mode. You know, like on YouTube, you can do like slow mode. If there's like, can I get a slow? I don't. No one would use it besides me, so don't add it for me. Maybe I'll add an extension. But I have noticed that. Like, how is like the reception of that been? Have you seen like good feedback as far as like minimizing the chat, or even as you're using it every single day?
I think it's been pretty good. I think it feels pretty good for it to be consistent. I think something that we had a couple months ago was that we had check marks all over the place. I think some of our tool calls would show up on the surface when, like, maybe it's a little bit annoying to see 10 read tool calls back to back to back to back, right? And I think just collapsing some of this stuff away, making it a little bit more minimal, making it more consistent, removing the check marks, adding stuff like um, the collapsed thinking mode where it just shows one tool call or the current tool call happening at the time. I think the reception has been pretty good, and it makes the chat feel kind of alive still with showing working progress, but also a little bit more minimal.
That's cool. And I also noticed Pierce showed off that you can customize the text of the shimmers of like what it's doing too.
Yes, yes. I've been a pretty big fan of that. I wanted to see the text bribing the hamster in chats. Like my internet's not going fast enough, so I got to feed the hamster more.
There you go. And now you can. So I love it. I've also noticed like that clarity has been helpful because sometimes when there's so much happening and scrolling in the chat, I can read like those things, the thinking and the reasoning. But like sometimes I'm like, oh, did it actually like execute my skill? And like now it's actually pretty clear because those things are auto collapse. I'm like, I can actually see like the action it's taking and not necessarily having to read every single thing. So it feels like those actions are much more important.
Yeah, yeah. It'll always collapse down and summarize. It's an LLM generated title regardless. So sometimes it's not 100% accurate of what it actually did, or like maybe it's trying to summarize a lot of stuff at the same time. But normally it'll, let's say you had like 4 reads and it like read a skill, it'll try to say something like reviewed and like updated this and this. So
That's
hopefully
cool.
that will help out with just kind of skimming through the chat and seeing what it tried to do.
Now it seems like that chat bottom window is ever evolving. Like it is always changing, especially if you're on insiders, you're rocking insiders. Every day it's different. I'm pretty sure that between local background, CLI, cloud, that background Copilot CLI work tree has changed the verbiage like 100 times, which I love, by the way. But there's a bunch of new things. Can you walk through, at least when we're recording this in the year of March 12th, 2026, like what has changed in the bottom input windows, like for developers to kind of know about, in both stable and obviously in insiders, and like why is that evolving, and what should they know before we go to the brand new hotness?
Yeah, yeah. I think the main thing is that we've split the toolbar that used to be in the input box into two different toolbars now. And the reason we wanted to do this is because there are some things that are more applicable towards the session, and then some things that are more applicable towards the request. So that's the main like differentiation between the two toolbars. Um, I think the permissions toolbar, the permissions picker is the main thing that's new, and adding this additional thing just would have made that input bar too large anyway. So from a UX perspective, it made sense to split it out, but also kind of gives you a good mental image of what's actually happening in the session, because the things at the bottom include the like the agent harness. So it'll be either like local Copilot, CLI, cloud, or Claude. And then the other one in there is the permissions picker, which I just talked about. So that's the main new thing we have now.
No, it makes a lot of sense. I like actually that didn't make sense to me why it moved until you just said it, which is like the reason, because actual the context of those different fields are important, right? Because you're when you're inside of a local session, you are adding context, you are picking the agent, you are picking the model, you are calling the tools, but it's always a local session once you pick that, right? In general, for that whole state. Well, let's talk about that permission picker because it's going to be brand new, because everything else has been there kind of and it's evolved and changed around a little bit, but it's brand new. And if people have used like the Copilot CLI, some of these things may be new to them, but also some of these features have been in the product, but now exposed in the UI a little bit more. So when people go into VS Code on the bottom of the chat window, they're going to see that local background, CLI slash cloud, you know, agent where it's running, but they're going to see the permissions. What is this permissions? What's in it? And what should people care about it right now today?
Yeah. So I want to talk briefly about like the main reason we wanted to expose it. I think people just didn't really know that we had global auto approve, right? It's something that if you go into your settings right now and you search YOLO mode or YOLO, it does show up. How many people are actually clicking this? I'm not entirely sure, but I would constantly get questions like, "Oh, do you guys actually have YOLO mode?" Yes, we do, and there's just a way to surface it. And just to try to solve that friction between approvals, like having to constantly say allow, allow, allow. And the three things that we currently have in the permissions picker are the one that you might see on startup. It's called default approvals. We have something called bypass approvals, and the last one is enabled currently by default only in state in insiders, and will be slowly rolled out in stable as we continue to run evaluations on it, as well as do some evaluation on like how cost is going to work. And the third one is autopilot. So I can briefly talk about what those three different things mean. I guess
Yeah.
this one with default approvals, it's basically as if nothing changed, right? It's going to use your default settings. It's going to use your configured settings. I believe the description there says like Copilot will use your configured settings. And what that really means behind the scenes is if you haven't changed anything in the user settings, if you haven't changed anything in like the workspace settings, or enterprise hasn't set anything, it will prompt you to allow certain tools to happen as you're going through the chat. But it will also take a look at what settings you have set, including any of the edit auto approve settings, which are, I think they're like pattern based rules for file edits. So certain files will get edited, certain files won't. It'll take a look at terminal auto approve settings. Like, I believe with terminal auto approve, we have like safe commands like cd or like cats or grep. I think these are some terminal tools that are automatically approved, but some of them are not, like rm or curl or eval or et cetera, et cetera. So these terminal tools will get you will get prompted to allow them in the session based on that setting. And then the last one is with URLs, with like fetches, like it'll double check, do you want to fetch from this URL specifically? So these settings are just all settings that you can find in the settings UI if you just search auto approve, I believe. But yeah, any setting related to auto approve will be followed in this default approvals mode. And it's already, once again, I already mentioned, it's already pretty good. You can configure it to be very specific in this mode. But then that brings us to the question of, what if I really just don't want to deal with approvals at all, right? And that's where bypass approvals come in. I think the description in bypass approvals says allow all tools are auto approved, something like that. And basically what it means is that we are automatically approving most tools. The only tools that actually won't be approved are stuff like ask questions or anything that requires explicit user input. So for example, the ask questions tool, as well as any terminal commands that might require you to type like yes or no, or terminal commands that require user input. So those are the two things that will stop and not be auto approved, but pretty much everything else will automatically be approved. And this is just an enhancement on the existing global auto approve setting. We're kind of in a weird state right now where we have this permission picker and still the setting, but the idea is that when you have it set in the permissions picker, it applies to that request in that session, and it ignores any existing settings you might have set. So anything that you set with all those auto approve settings that I just mentioned will get completely ignored if you have bypass approvals on. It will just automatically continue on tool calls. It'll auto retry on errors. That was like a big one as well. And then it will still prompt you for certain things that require user input.
And that's super nice too, especially if you're working like inside of a sandbox or like a code space. Like I was working on, I did a pull request, Justin. I don't know if you want to approve it. But I did a pull request to the vscode repo, and in the chat there's a gear. And right now it's a huge drop down list of a bunch of stuff. What I really wanted to do is bring up the new customization UI.
Right.
So I did a pull request and I was like, I don't know anything about the VS Code code base. Don't really care about it as far as like learning where every single thing is. But I wrote a big plan and I was like, hey, let's plan this out. And I was like, cool, do a bunch of stuff. And then just like, keep going, right? Just keep going, keep doing stuff, figuring it all out, write the test, validate the stuff. And that was nice because it wasn't necessarily like doing a lot of what you're saying of like having to run tons of terminal commands or running a bunch of web stuff, but it was like running tests. It was checking the output where I would have to be validating every single time, but I was in a code space. So I was like in a just a cloud environment where I was in a safe environment, and that was super nice. Just in general, or for example, I guess with bypass tools, you can still limit the tools that it has, right? So if you're just working with MCPs and you're like, I only want to able to do these things, it can only follow those tools, which is kind of nice too.
Exactly. Yeah. And I guess to kind of roll on to the third picker that we have now, and that's the cool, shiny new thing that we've been working on. So this was actually inspired by Copilot CLI. So Autopilot is actually a mode that Copilot CLI already has existing. And it was something I wanted to bring over to VS Code because I think the application, it's pretty much the same, whether you're in local chat or using the Copilot CLI in VS Code. I think generally, if you trust the agent, if you're in a safe environment, I think it's a great tool to just create a great plan and then let it run its course, and you can kind of like shift tasks and do a couple different things. But the idea behind it, it's currently still in preview. As I mentioned at the beginning, insiders only at this point in time. You can enable it with the chat.autopilot setting in Sable, but it won't be defaulted to true there. And the premise of Autopilot is that it has everything that bypass approvals has and a little bit more. The idea is that it will try to iterate autonomously until it thinks that it's done with the task. And the inspiration, as I mentioned, CLI, I think Claude Code also has something similar called like a Ralph loop. But it will actually do a couple additional things like auto replying to questions. So if the ask questions tool gets run, it'll auto reply to those questions. If it's a user input required anything, whether it's a terminal or with the ask questions tool that requires user like to type an answer in a freeform box or something like that, it'll respond by saying that the user isn't there to act on its visibility. And then lastly, it will retry and like kind of try and continue depending on the state of where it thinks it currently is. So we have this thing called the task complete tool, which is just saying, hey, don't call this tool unless the task is actually complete. And obviously I dumbed it down a little bit, but the idea is that we check to see if that task complete tool was ever called. Otherwise, we just continue to let it iterate, let it iterate, let it iterate. We do have a max continuations. I believe right now we say like max reiterate like 5 times. The idea is to make this configurable down the line, but at the moment we're just kind of hard coding it at that point. Um, yeah, I mean it's just a cool thing to set off on its own. I don't want the agent to ask me anything. I don't want the agent to have to require any user input. I'll just let it run its course, finish the job, and yeah, I think it's just pretty cool to not have to look at the agent turn by turn and be like, oh, I have to approve all this, and now I can just let it run its course.
So you said it is different. So the thinking then different between bypass? Like bypass and default basically runs the same system prompt, but you're saying autopilot has some extra juice to it, basically. And if I'm understanding it correct, like, is that extra juice in the way that it's thinking, in the way that it's looking at the task list? Like, is it validating its work? Is it implementing something and then revalidating it and then in like is it like code reviewing it? Like is that the type of loop that it's doing until it's done?
Yeah, so unfortunately, at the moment, it's not that smart. I think we're doing some evals. We're trying to see where we can improve it, like stuff with like code review or stuff with like forcing iterations. But right now, realistically, we just have a slightly modified system prompt, letting it know that it's an autopilot, letting it know that the user is not going to be there to answer any questions or to to like yeah, basically answer any questions or answer any like user required inputs that we might show. But the main thing is just with like this task complete tool. The idea is that
Okay.
the task complete tool will just be the source of like ground truth where yes, you called it, we know we're done. You haven't called it, let's try to continue until we actually are finished. Um, and I see a lot of times in like my own testing that sometimes it'll work its way down and then it'll finish, but then you'll notice that the task isn't complete and it'll be like, oh, let me try again. And then maybe in that try again, it'll actually try to run some tests or it'll try to do some more reads or do some more tool calls. There are a couple cases where it doesn't need to do anything else and it'll just return like, oh, hey, I'm actually done. And then it'll actually finish.
Got it. I see. And then there's some models that what I've noticed too, maybe this is where this autopilot comes in. Some models like to do like one or two things and then stop and be like, hey, you want to check out this work? And then just say like continue or like, do you want me to validate it? Right. Like, and the answer is like probably like, yeah, run the build. So in this case, you're saying it'll just continuously go through that list. It's not going to stop basically. It's just going to keep going.
Exactly. Yeah. We have some like I mean we're all open source, so you can actually go and look at what part task complete tool says. I think it says something along like I mean I have it pulled up here, but it says something along the lines of like yeah, signal when the task is completely done. Like don't like provide a summary when you're finished. Like you must call this tool only when task is complete. Verify that your changes work. Like double check that there aren't any like remaining to dos. And then on the case of continuation, we mentioned, oh, like um, because you haven't called this tool yet, make sure that you verify that the tool is complete or that the task has been complete using this tool. And then it'll continue
Mm,
to iterate and then it'll actually mark it as done. So yeah,
that's
I mean,
cool.
yeah, still playing around with it and like once again trying to do some evals on it, doing a lot of self-hosting on it. But generally I think it's a great tool regardless because it still does all the bypass approval stuff and you can be a lot more hands off um, instead of just like disabling the ask questions tool or something.
That makes sense. I've also noticed that there's integration with plan mode. as well with Autopilot? Like I've noticed, I don't know if it happens every time or not, but on occasion I see like run with Autopilot. Like, how is that integration working?
Yeah, yeah. So there are two ways that there are two kind of entry points. So the first one is if you start plan mode in Autopilot, it will well, plan mode normally doesn't really like ask for approvals except for like with the ask questions tool. But if you start the plan mode with Autopilot, it'll go through, it'll know that it's an autopilot, it'll answer the questions automatically,
Well,
and then once it's done planning, it will automatically hand off to the agent. So it'll go plan in Autopilot and then immediately start implementation. The alternative is if you start it in regular like approvals, it will still end at the end of the when it's done planning, but then there will be that handoff option to start in Autopilot in which you click on it and then it'll turn that session into Autopilot.
so you said you've been dog fooding and doing some internal stuff. How are you using Autopilot and how are you seeing it? Like, when are you making the distinction of the different modes personally?
Yeah, yeah. Honestly, it's been like 99% Autopilot. I guess part of it is the dog fooding, and then part of it is like in terms of like what I'm trying to get done. It's just more convenient if I just never have to take a look at it. Maybe I'm just taking a look at what happens at the end, reviewing the code at the end. Um, there are certain applications where it's like maybe it's better to use bypass approvals instead of autopilot. But yeah, personally for me, like if I'm just setting off like 3 or 4 different like sessions to take a look at like a bug here or a bug there, just having it run in autopilot where it'll automatically verify either like I attach a link to a GitHub PR or a link to a GitHub issue, and I'm like, oh, it'll automatically fetch it. It'll automatically do any like it'll automatically do any like terminal tool calls for me. It'll automatically create work trees for me, stuff like that. It's just way easier for me to just go through and then go through the different work trees, and they're all on autopilot. So I just look at the final results.
Oh, that's really cool. I didn't know that it would spawn off work trees for you as well.
I
That's
mean,
really neat.
I'm prompting it. I'm prompting it to do so, and especially with our sessions app, that's something that you can do now as well. But it's not that's not like an autopilot exclusive thing.
Yeah, I sometimes people forget, like, if you just tell it to do the thing, it'll go and do the thing.
Yeah.
Like, if you just tell it to go create it, it'll go, "Oh, cool, I'll create work trees for you, go." Do you are you using it for, like, a single issue? Or are you kind of Ralph looping it where you're like, "Hey, I have this, project, go look at the repo, go through all the issues and do the thing fully and create work trees and just do it?" Or are you just kinda working on one thing at a time?
I'm kind of doing one thing at a time and just doing multiple sessions of it and just being very hands off. I think I could let it just take a look at the GitHub or our our VS Code repo and just be like, I have all these issues assigned to me. Like, let's try to solve all of them. I think personally, I don't want to ship like bad code, so I do want to look to see what it's actually doing um, at the end of the day, and not just like accept just like randomly. So unfortunately, it's not something I'd wanna do yet, but it is definitely something you could try. You could try. I might try it later on today and just say like, "Oh, this range of issues, I have a range of issues from the last week. Let's just, like, take a look at all these, see what is easy to fix, see what's not, and just, like, bump it all into one PR."
That's cool. Yeah, I've been experimenting around with it a lot because we track a lot of work in GitHub, and we have a lot of different like project settings, and we have a bunch of like different requirements, and like I need to like go grab like YouTube stats. I need all this stuff, and I find like I've created some skills to like go and say, okay, here's what I need you to do for my backlog work tracking, and I just say like let it rip, and then it's going to call and it's going to run a bunch of like PowerShell scripts, it's going to run a bunch of this, but it's kind of in this frame where it knows that it needs to just like only do these things. And I found that super nifty because the auto approved tools, maybe this is a Daniel feedback, seems to be like really good. Or I can be like, oh yeah, run all the GH commands, like just go to town, right? Or just like go web request, go to town, right? For specific URLs, like, oh yeah, it's fine to go look at github.com, or like, Microsoft Learn documentation. But then there's other ones like for like PowerShell scripts, it's like every little indication without like running all. So I'm just like, okay, go for it, right? And sometimes I think the other nice thing is sometimes, at least for me, how I feel is like I don't want to get in this pattern with the default of just always saying, oh yeah, just approve all, just for in the workspace, in the workspace, in the workspace. Because then it feels like it's almost diminishing the point of the approvals because it's then you got to go manage going back. So I'm like, okay, I often do for this session. So that's kind of nice too that these are session based in general. This is really cool. I didn't know exactly how it worked, so it's kind of good because people are going to see this, like, okay, how's this usage on it? I guess if people want to give feedback, what's the best way for people to give feedback on autopilot mode?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Pierce and I have been posting on Twitter. We always get a bunch of feedback there. But the easiest way usually is just creating an issue in the VS Code repo. We'll definitely see it. I think it'll probably get auto assigned to me. But anything feedback related, whether it's not looping the way it's supposed to, or you don't really understand how it works, I mean, feel free. I'll chime in on the issue. But that's probably the best way to find us.
Very cool. Well, Justin, thank you for coming on and talking through this autopilot mode. If you haven't tried it out, go check it out. I've been using it like every single day. I really love it. So, and we'll keep getting more updates, whatever is next in this world. I love it. And yeah, we have some really cool stuff coming out from the team. You guys are crushing it with these weekly releases too. So get up there. By the time this is out, maybe it'll already be in stable. We'll see. Justin, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, cool. Thanks everyone for tuning in to this VS Code Insiders podcast. Don't forget, you can subscribe, like, of course, on the YouTube. We're on our own to 1 million YouTube subscribers, so check that out. There's a sweet 1M on the top of code.visualstudio.com. That's a pretty sweet sub page. Go check that out. And also, of course, you could listen to us as well. You don't have to like watch me interview people all the time. You can just subscribe to the VS Code Insiders podcast on your favorite podcast application, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Cast. That's my favorite. That's me, though. But that's going to do it for this VS Code Insiders podcast. So until next time, happy coding.